Hello, YouTubers out there. This is Jerry Saravia at the movies. So today, filmmaker Quentin Tarantino made a comment at I think The Guardian and other newspapers or blogs have reiterated his comments, which were basically he is not a fan of Marvel comic book movies, although Marvel is not the only one making comic book movies. There's also DC. Nonetheless, he says they are glutting the marketplace, which they are. And he also had made a comment that the movie stars that appear in these movies are not necessarily the stars, not movie stars themselves. In other words, nobody is clamoring to see the next Chris Hemsworth movie unless he's playing Thor. And same thing with some of the other actors that have appeared. I guess Robert Downey Jr. would be included to some extent. Um, so as far as the movie stars thing goes, I do agree with that. First of all, not a lot of people. I'm not sure there's anyone really cares that deeply about a movie star being in a movie, period, nowadays. Think about that. A movie star in a movie doesn't guarantee an audience, unless it's maybe Leonardo DiCaprio, perhaps Brad Pitt. Now, if they starred in a comic book movie, that would be a tremendous success, whether the movie is good or not, which, if they were cast, it probably would be at least halfway decent. But in general, there isn't there aren't a whole lot of movie stars out there anymore. I mean, they exist, but people are not going to see the movies because they are in them. And I guess what he's saying is that the comic book movies have a guaranteed audience, a pre-sold audience, but not because of who's in it necessarily, but what characters appear as the comic book heroes. So there is truth to that. Now, I'm not going to get into our comic book movies. I don't know why we're always talking about Marvel. Marvel is not the only one, but why, are they cinema or not? We're not going to get into that. But I would like to point out something Francis Ford Coppola said to journalists. This was a few years ago about Martin Scorsese's comments about cinema. And he said that we expect to learn something from cinema. We expect to gain something, some enlightenment, some knowledge, some inspiration. And then he says, I don't know what anyone gets anything out of seeing the same movie over and over again. And there may be truth to that. Comic book movies are not necessarily about people per se, because they have superpowers, and most people cannot relate to that. They can only relate to the personality, which is why Robert Downey Jr. was so ideally cast in Iron Man, because we cared about him. He is still human. He's not actually, well, he may carry some power, but he's not a superhero technically, like Superman or, Batman is not a superhero. I'm saying all this and I'm wearing a Ghostbuster shirt, so, who am I to talk? The irony is really quite something here. But I'm not putting down these movies at all. I think they are necessary to some degree. Entertainment is always necessary. Pure entertainment has its place. But that really shouldn't be all that's glutting the marketplace. Now, let's make one thing clear. When superhero movies weren't that big, so let's go back to 2006, for example. So you had the third X-Men film that came out that year, X-Men The Last Stand, and you also had the Da Vinci Code, which is not a superhero film, with Tom Hanks, which was a highly touted release. Both films at the AMC theater here were playing on about 3 screens each, roughly. So 6 screens out of 12. So there's no room. There never has been a whole lot of room for smaller pictures. Usually they're confined to one screen, and that's that, because of course they don't expect that to be a huge hit, not a blockbuster, which is what AMC thrives on. They want their blockbusters because that's how they make money. That's how the exhibitors make money. So this has been a problem long before superhero cinema was a thing. Any movie that was highly touted as the blockbuster of the year or the blockbuster of the summer, which is usually about 10 now or 15 different movies being touted as the blockbuster of the summer, are usually playing in multiplexes. And multiplexes, of course, guess what? They have more than one screen, and those movies do as well. It used to be that, although I don't see it as much anymore, a movie would be released in 2D, standard screen, and then an IMAX screen, and possibly IMAX 3D. So right there, you're just there's seemingly no room for anything else. So that's been a constant problem. It's not anything new, really. It goes with the territory as far as the blockbuster films. But it's funny that back in the day, 1977 with Star Wars, or even before that, The Exorcist, both huge films, were playing. Usually they were fairly limited. I mean, they played in most cities, but you didn't have multiplexes then. So a screening could be sold out. Maybe they would make another screen available, but it wasn't very common in those days. You would have to wait to go to the next screen. And there's none of that anticipation anymore. Really, you can buy a ticket for a movie almost, in some cases, like with The Dark Knight Rises, I believe, was about 6 months in advance before the movie was even out. So there is none of this, let's put up tents and wait to be the first ones. Nobody cares. It's just not a thing anymore. Let's be the first ones to see the new Star Wars movie, and that's just not a thing. So that is also part of the problem. It's glutting the marketplace, which I don't like to refer to it that way, but that's what it is, And these movies are referred to as franchises, or in some cases, content. Terms I don't really agree with. That is also another problem. We seem to be limiting what cinema is and just see it as content, which makes no sense to me. Rotten Tomatoes is not an easy it's digestible for most people, but it's not. It makes it kind of, how can I put it? They downplay the effectiveness of criticism, because sometimes Rotten Tomatoes is not an accurate meter, and it shouldn't be metered anyway, of the tastes of critics or just their opinions. And many of them are blogs. Probably 90% are blogs. Very few come from actual newspapers being printed that have reviews by actual film critics. So, but it's not always an accurate meter, because sometimes a film can be rated 2.5 stars and actually be considered a recommendation, but with strong reservations. So but they usually put that on the category of not recommended. So there's a lot of that going on. But as far as movie stars, I think that's a thing of the past, except maybe for Leo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt, when the two of them were together in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And a film by Quentin Tarantino, who's also a star director, that's different. M. Night Shyamalan, I think, carries the star director, Martin Scorsese, to some degree, Paul Thomas Anderson. Steven Spielberg, hard to say. Some people see him, which I think is accurate nowadays, as sort of an art house director, as if he is still, I think, pretty much the most popular filmmaker in history. Nobody's had as many hits as he had. And yet his new film, The Fabelmans, is sort of like art house. Well, it's not a superhero movie. Well, so what? I mean, a blockbuster can be a drama. It used to be. But anyway. So there's a lot of truth to what Tarantino said. But I don't see these things changing. And I think what's interesting to me is I think Tarantino's waiting for the cinema houses to get their asses in gear, so to speak, about streaming and that window, that 45-day window where a film can be streaming, even though it may still be playing in theaters, for free on any cable service you're using. Now, that's beneficial for me, with the ability to see new releases, which I don't get to all the time. But, where does that leave Tarantino, who prides himself on the work that he has done, and he should. And I think he would like a film to be shown in theaters for a while before it ever makes it to streaming or Blu-ray DVD, which used to be the case. But I don't know. So let me your thoughts. Tell me what you think about comic book movies in general. There was a comment made by Simu Lu, who was in Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, and called them white as hell filmmakers, Tarantino and Scorsese. So anyway, tell me, I'm not going to read all through that, but let me know what your views are on comic book movies. Are they glutting the marketplace? Is Tarantino right about movie stars? And where does this leave cinema in the future? It's funny, critics used to be worried about what was going to happen to cinema after Star Wars in 1977. And we've reached a point now where everything sort of has to feel like Star Wars. Isn't that crazy? Just it has to be a big, glorious sci-fi special effect spectacle, as if that's the only thing that's worthy of seeing on a digital video screen, being shown not on 35 millimeter, but digital video. This is what we're clamoring for nowadays. This is what we get. So let me your thoughts, and if you like what you hear, please subscribe to my channel. And this is Jerry Saravia to Movies, signing off.